Hello, I'm Chris Williams from Read Comics, They're Bad For You, and on my BitChute channel, Comic Freak. Today we're going to be reviewing Swampthing Episode 7, Brilliant Disguise. We start off where we left off in the last episode, where Swampthing released that pollen from that flower he grew out of his hand. It allows Abby Arcane and him to see him as his original self, Alec Holland. It's sure to say that Swampthing is happy once again being Alec. And him and Abby spend the next while of the episode inside the cabin just talking. And, well, Swampthing ends up giving Abby, making a plant, bringing a bunch of different kinds of fruit growing on its limbs, and she eats it, and they enjoy their time together. She's amazed at his abilities, and Alec Holland cannot really do nothing but say that the green just responds to my emotions, and when it heard you were hungry, when I heard I was hungry, the green responded by growing you these fruits for you to eat. And he's just happy, and she's happy, and they're getting along great together. It's not really all that great for the episode. This kind of stalls out a major part of this entire episode, is them just standing around in his old lab, just reminiscing. Meanwhile, things are continue to happen with Avery Sunderland and his wife Maria. Now, it looks like both of them are getting along well, and Maria's commenting on how tonight's dinner with their special guest is going to be good. And Avery's just happy that she's gotten over her funk over what happened with their daughter. But that's when suddenly the sheriff comes in. The sheriff comes in to tell Avery that she hates him for involving her son in his problems, and that she hates him for it. But she also tells him that Alec Holland is still alive, that he's been deformed by the plant virus. And Avery is just beside himself. He doesn't know what to do. And she tells him, "You're going to help me solve this problem. We're going after him, and we're going to end him for good." She finally convinces him to go out, and he says, "Fine." And he tells Maria that he might be late for the dinner, but he will be back tonight. She tells him the sheriff tells Avery that she never thought he would do something like this involving her son in his criminal pursuits and basically making him a murderer. Later on, Abby and Alec go out into the swamp, and they see the wonders of the swamp, how the green, Alec tells her, responds to him, and since he's in a good mood, it's making the swamp even prettier with flowers she's rarely ever seen in this part of the swamp, or even in this part of the country. He tells her that the green is very powerful, but it's constantly at odds with other forces of nature, a balance that has been upset by both Avery Sunderland and all of mankind as they continue to exploit the resources of the earth. And instead of giving back anything to the earth, they give back pollution and poisons that have disrupted the balance. And he thinks that his turning into Swampthing was because of that. And he continues to tell her, while taking her to the spot where the most likely whatever it is that's coming out of the swamp that's killing people, the rot. Meanwhile, Jason Woodrue continues to look at the serum he created and wonder how his subject, Daniel Cassidy, had reacted so wildly to it. I mean, we don't see Daniel in this episode, so presumably he's still alive. I know he's still alive because it's gone too far into the character development to just kill him off screen. Well, Maria Sunderland comes to him and she asks Jason Woodrue, "Can you perfect this serum if you have enough time?" He gives a couple of answers to her, but she just says, "Can you?" And he says, "Yes. If I have enough funding and enough time, I will perfect this, and it will be a miracle cure for anyone who takes it." And she says, "Fine. Just show up at the dinner tonight." Meanwhile, it turns out that the sheriff brought Avery Sunderland out there to actually kill him because we pretty much figured it out, and he was about to shoot the sheriff, and she was pleading for her life when her son, Matt Cable, came up and cold-cocked Avery over the head, knocking him unconscious. And she said, "I was wondering how long it was going to take you to do something. I had thought you had left." Matt just responds with a couple of nods, or maybe insults, really. He's not happy being out there, and he's not happy that he's once again going to take a man's life. But he knows what he needs to do if he wants to be free of Avery Sunderland. So he ends up taking him and tying him up, and they begin hauling him out of there. They take him back to the boat that they both used, well, the sheriff and Avery used to get to the swamp. They're going to kill Avery. We switch over back to Alec Holland and Abby Arcane as they reach the area that has been completely taken over by the rot. And Alec tells her it's a dark and vile force that is constantly at odds with the green. Now, if you know anything about the rot, you know it's a natural part of nature. Things live and then they die, and things are reborn and then they live and they die again. A constant cycle. But from his point of view, he sees all of this as a rot because he's just getting used to the notions of the green. And he sees the rot is killed most of the swamp it's infected. And Abby is trying to take a sample when suddenly a vine reaches out and just grabs her around the wrist and tears into her skin almost like a snake biting her. And she's infected with the rot. And as soon as, they see that, Alex sees that as soon as he gets the vine off of her and takes a look at her at the wound, she sees that she's been poisoned because black vines of poison sprout over her skin. Meanwhile, we switch over back to Avery, who's now at the bottom of the boat and is about to be shot by Matt Cable when he tells Matt that he's actually Avery's son. The sheriff tells him don't listen to Avery, but he tells her, "You knew this? You knew that he was my father?" When Avery manages to get a knife he had on him and stabs Matt in the chest. And Matt goes down, but then the sheriff just manages to get a shotgun and shoot Avery in the back as he dives over of the boat's railing, and she goes over to see, and she doesn't see him. She thinks she got him and that he's drowned or bled out in the swamp waters. Well, she takes the wheel of the boat and she drives off with her son to try and make sure he doesn't bleed out and die. Meanwhile, she hopes that Avery is actually dead. We don't know what happens to Avery in the next scene, but we do come back to Abby Arcane and Alec Holland. Alec has managed to bring her back to his lab, and he is trying to treat her wound. And the poison in her is continuing to swell around her veins and continuing to spread up her arm and into her body. Well, she tells him, since you control plants, bring this one plant that's been known as a miracle cure to cure such plant poisons before. Make one grow here. And he tells her he can't, but you can. You can, if you can feel plants through the green, you can bring it here. And he does. He makes a serum and he injects her with it. The next scene we see as both the poison of the rot and the anti-venom of the plant Alec had injected her with continue to battle it out in her body. He uses the power of the Swampthing to give the serum even more power to fight the rot. As you can see, it's spreading over her stomach. He just manages to cure her of it. Meanwhile, the sheriff takes Matt back to Maria Sunderland's house. And Maria says, "You can't be here." And she says, "You know damn well I have nowhere else to go." She manages to also bring a friend of hers who's a doctor who is going to treat Matt's wound. And Maria reluctantly lets both of them inside. And the doctor treats Matt Cable's wound as Maria and the sheriff talk about they set up Avery's death. This comes out of nowhere because We knew Maria didn't really like her husband Avery anymore, but we didn't think it had gone to the point of murder. So this just comes out of nowhere. This is on top of the fact that Maria has been able to smooth the guy Avery had been trying to get to come and invest in the project for this super serum. Well, the serum that would cure brain damage and mental diseases. She manages to convince him to invest in Jason Woodrue's project. Meanwhile, Abby Arcane and Alec Holland continue to talk about what's happening as Alec tells her that the pollen he used to make himself look like Alec Holland again is beginning to wear off, because you see it points the Swampthing costume coming out of his skin before it fades away. He tells her that she should leave here and that it's too dangerous for her to stay in the swamp or in Marias, Louisiana. She reluctantly agrees, and she does end up leaving Marias, Louisiana this episode, because she leaves it to go back to Austin, apparently, back to the CDC. And this is how the episode ends. And it's a fair episode, not a great episode. Certainly there were horror elements in this, but it was more or less the same thing we saw in the last episode, it being basically a violent crime show now. This isn't good! I like the horror! It was great! And this is bad. I want more horror, not this pseudo police stuff. And this just shows you why the DC Universe canceled Swamp Thing at 10 episodes. Now, I can only hope if they do renew it, they go back to straight horror. If you like this review, subscribe. Make sure you're still subscribed. If you're watching my videos but you have not subscribed, please subscribe to me at Read Comics, They're Bad For You. Hit that bell for notifications for all my future videos. And hit that like button and leave some comments down below. And remember, keep checking back in future videos for more information on my own upcoming independent comic book, Scumdogs. Also, go over to BitChute and subscribe to Comic Freak. I'm Chris Williams, and I'll be back again tomorrow with another video or review.